Thank you for joining me today for a conversation with one of the most dynamic filmmakers working in the industry. I'm Dr. Diana Martinez, the Artistic Director of Film Strings. Elizabeth Chai Vasarhelyi is an Academy Award-winning director and producer. Most recently, she directed and produced The Rescue, an enthralling against all odds story about the 2018 rescue of 12 boys and their coach from deep inside a flooded cave in northern Thailand. Previously, Vasarhelyi directed and produced Free Solo, which was awarded a BAFTA and the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 2019. The film also received 7 Emmy Awards. Vasarhelyi's other films as a director include Meru, Incorruptible, and A Normal Life. Vasarhelyi has also directed pieces for the New York Times Op Docs, Netflix, and ESPN, among others. She splits her time between New York City and Jackson Hole, Wyoming, with her husband Jimmy Chin, their daughter Marina, and her son James. You are a master of suspense and tension in your filmmaking. I really do think it is unique, especially in the documentary space, the way that in the last 3 films, especially this like trilogy almost, of these men who do indescribable physical feats, are doing amazing things. So where in the process do you begin to build that tension? Is it in the editing room, when you're interviewing subjects, in the research process? Where does that come in?
I mean, it's throughout the whole process, because, when you're interviewing, I like editing while we're filming. Because we work with an amazing editor. His name's Bob Eisenhart, and he edited Free Solo and Meru. And, if you know where you want to go in an interview, like it helps the quality of the interview. It was an interesting one where, we were asking people to kind of suspend disbelief, and like, even though they knew how it was going to pan out, to kind of allow themselves to get immersed in this kind of rescue. So, in terms of tension, we were always fighting towards, how much could we afford to cut away from the action? Because that really is what it's about. It's about, like, in its best form, The Rescue is a character portrait as well as, a chronicle of the rescue, as well, like, to say something like more universal about what, the story really could mean. So, stuff like getting to know Rick and John and the divers and understanding what cave diving was is really important to the story, but it also pulls you out of the story. So it's just a dance, and, we take a long time and we edit, and because that's just our process. Like, I like to try everything, because I think you learn something from everything. And, everything's by degree. So it's just like, I don't know, you just work really hard.
There's this axiom, right, that everybody says when you're making films: show, don't tell. What does that mean to you? And what are some filmmakers, besides yourself, of course, who you think do this really well, or some films that you think do this really well?
I mean, showing and not telling means exactly that you could allowing audiences to observe character and action for themselves. It's kind of the premise of cinema verite, where you just follow people, and you're like a, fly on the wall. Question is, like, how do you, and it's all kind of subtextual, like, you can take so many different things from a scene. I think Joshua Oppenheim in Act of Killing did an incredible job, because it was a show, and it ends up kind of, verging on the sublime in terms of what you can take away from the film and how you understand or try to get close to the nuances, the very complex nuances of Indonesian society and the genocide. So, and the humanity of the perpetrators, that was the film that popped into my mind. I think Steve James is a master of it. All of his work, like Stevie, is still my favorite, because it talks about so many things. And, what we do is like more construct it a little bit, because especially this, we weren't there for the principal. photography. And so we were very much reliant on our primary sources. But I think it with the right construction, it kind of allows you to go with it in some way.
With all this footage that you had to sift through for the rescue, it's like 87 hours of footage at one point that you were given to put into this film. How do you begin with such a large task like that? Is it something, when you receive that footage, do you already know what you were looking for? Or was it more a process of sitting down and then letting that story develop on its own as you're watching it?
Well, to put it in perspective, Meru only ever had 80 hours. Okay. And Free Solo had about over 800 hours. The story about the 87 hours here was that our film was essentially finished. And because there was this fundamental challenge or problem with the story in that there was very little known footage from within the cave, finding that footage, because there was always this idea that the Thai Navy SEALs probably filmed inside the cave, and we tried to kind of negotiate with them to get access to it, but they're an elite special forces, not in the business of showing people what they do. And, that's one of the reasons why you see so many blurred faces in the film, is to protect their identity because they're active duty. And, so we anticipated maybe they would have an hour. And what it turned out to be was 87 hours. And we were supposed to finish the film June 1st, and the footage arrived in New York June 15th. So in that case, it was like a desperate sprint to translate and scour the footage, because we were looking for scenes. We were looking for moments that we never had access to. So, traditionally in all my films, like, our editor watches every frame. And you cull. And I think that that's one of the things that takes us why we take so much time in our process, is that we really like to consider very carefully what we have. And in this case, frankly, it was way too rushed. Like, I still have nightmares that maybe we left something behind that we could have used. But yes, we were looking for scenes, like real, where you see things happen.
Can you describe to me the feeling, whether it's emotional, whether it's intellectual, like the feeling where you're like, that's it, we got it. Like that's the shot, or like that's the soundbite, or that's the moment that makes you feel that you are arriving at the project that you had in mind? What does that feel like for you?
It feels like when you actually get involved in your own story when you're watching it, and when you actually can listen to it and like you are involved and you're moved. It's kind of when I think that question pertains very nicely to like when you're actually filming, like when you're shooting, like how do you know when you're done? And normally there are those aha moments, like, oh, we got it. In terms of editing, I could keep on editing forever, happily,
Just over and over again.
You never find me saying I'm done. I'm famous for changing a movie in the mix. Like, it's just, if you can make it better, why wouldn't you? It's kind of the point.
Are there themes that you find yourself returning to in your work? Are there questions that you seem to be kind of continually asking, if not, at the forefront, but like maybe in the background? Is there something that you are looking for in the projects that you're making?
I mean, it's going to sound too vague, but I think all my films are about connection. From the political films that I made in the beginning of my career, it's about finding the common ground we share. And there's always been this hope behind them, a very idealistic hope that like somehow we can contribute to the world we want, to see. And I think, after Free Solo, like Jimmy and I became very aware of the platform we have. And that was one of the things that was so urgent about this movie, about the rescue, was that, here is a story about what connects us and what is like the best part of humans, like this idea of, can you do the right thing? Can you be your best self? Do you know how to be generous? And it's like a very bittersweet thing for me with the pandemic, because the story is about all these different people coming together against all odds and achieving the impossible. But if we all, it only gains a poignancy through the pandemic, because if we all were our best selves and were generous and, did the right thing, we would be in a very different place as a society. So I think like I've always looked at documentaries as about connection. It was about allowing audiences to experience something completely different and humanizing, these people who live in a different place or a different time or different characters. So that's it.
So at Film Streams, we have an initiative where we're trying to change the world. I guess it's a lofty saying. And it's called See Change, and it's a gender parity initiative where we're trying to reach 50% women-directed films showing in our theaters across all of our programs. So it's a really, it'll be a difficult task. There aren't 50% women-directed films being made in independent film in Hollywood and documentary. So I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about being a woman in the industry. So as a producer and as a director, doing both of those roles together, how does that shape how you see the role of women in film?
It's a hard question. I can say that there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of representation in our industry. It's actually kind of shocking, even though we're going through some awakening, it's like, we're so far away. And I see that every time I walk into a room and the journalist looks at Jimmy instead of me. I see that. And women are guilty of it too. And so in terms of being a producer and a director, it's just kind of who I am. And it's the type of films we make. Same thing with Jimmy, is like, he's producing those climbs, like 100% and producing those cameras, and like no one else can produce it. And what I do, I'm producing the film and directing the film and also producing our family. And, it's like, you just are multifaceted, but, I think the producer directors are more common in nonfiction because directors play such a producerial role. But I don't know how my experience shapes, the role of women in film, except to say that like there's very, very deep chauvinism and inequity within our industry, and it persists in terms of access to financing, access to. I think there's like a deep misogyny in our networks, and even as perpetuated by some women who run them, about the type of programming that they know is successful versus the type of programming that would be doing the right thing and could be very entertaining too. So I'm happy to talk forever about all the misogyny I see and the iniquity. And I guess in our company, we're just trying to make it better step by step. But even that, I'm always like, we could do more.
Kind of going off of that. So, you've been making films for over 2 decades at this point. Mm-hmm. And so from the beginning of your career to now, have there been any changes that you've made, whether in the way that you run your business or the way that you act personally in a room, that you think has really changed the way people see you as a business person and as a filmmaker?
As a filmmaker, I began making films in English, where I'd always been making films in other languages, which I think actually really helped me as a filmmaker in that it's really hard to make a film in another language, and it honed my craft. But once I started making films in English about more, English speaking subject matters like Meru, I think people looked at my work differently. They had different access to the work. In terms of business and also as a director, I'll never forget. I can't remember who said it, but I was at some women's panel, and this woman said, "Listen, women always think that the work speaks for itself," and she's like, "It doesn't," right? And I'm like, that's so true, because I always was like, oh, they'll notice because my work's so good. I gave it my all, but they don't. They notice it when you walk up to them and shake someone's hand and tell them about what you want, which is against everything in my character. But I thought it was a very powerful thing. And I just realized that self-advocacy is a really important element of this. And it's what I try to tell. I do think that women just think that people will notice, as opposed to men who tell, go out and scream it from the top of the building of what they've done. So I try to encourage all the filmmakers I work with to really self-advocate and really don't expect someone else to come knocking. I mean, I wasn't approached by an agent until after Free Solo. Meru made over like $12 million in the box office, and I was approached by an agent. And even
but you've also been winning awards.
No, every
throughout your entire career.
I know, but I've never been approached by an agent, only for a date, and that's true. Like it was like after my first film, I was approached by an agent for a date, essentially.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. It's given how difficult filmmaking is, how long projects take to complete, what keeps you motivated when you're exhausted?
Participants in our stories. You know, I think to get involved in any film, fiction or nonfiction, you have to respect those participants, and there's got to be a reason why you're there. You've got to somehow feel personally involved. And whenever I get tired, which is all the time, I'm tired all the time. You know, I think about how these films are for life for our participants, and like I have to do my best because they've trusted me. And that's why, like, that's the point of documentaries. Like, you know, like the needs of the film can't trump the needs of the participants, and my needs can't trump the needs of the participants either.
Is it hard to say goodbye to your subjects?
Oh, but I don't say goodbye. I mean, this is the best story about the Oscar, was like when I won an Oscar, every single participant, like principal participant in all my films, and that had been by then 6, called or emailed or texted within that night. And it just showed how close we always remained. It's not that we didn't fight. I always have a disagreement at some point with a participant in a film, but that's the point, is like, I have to be candid with them and they have to be candid with me. You know, it's mutual trust. Like Alex and I had a very famous disagreement. But now, you know, our kids are going to be in his wedding next weekend. And, you know, I call him when I'm lonely and we just talk, you know? So it's just, you don't say goodbye, because your films do transform other people's lives, and much more than our own. And I don't know, I don't think you can really, like, it's like such a personal, like intimate relationship. So yeah.
I have one more question for you, because I know we're coming up on time. What is your big dream at the end? Let's say at the end of your career, what do you hope that you have contributed to filmmaking, to producing, to the world generally? What's the big dream?
The big dream is just to keep on doing my best and hopefully promoting the values that I believe in, with a clear heart and a clear mind and open heart, and to raise 2 good citizens in my children. You know, I guess one of the dreams would be like have amazing work-life balance, but that's never going to happen.
You don't know that.
But I do. I'm like, I work really hard, and I parent really hard, you know, like it's just every minute counts. So no, I don't, like, I haven't gone for a run in like 2 months. And I could really use one. So yeah, I don't know. That's such a big question. I don't know. I just hope to leave things slightly better, and hopefully our environment's going to be a little bit like start healing a bit. And I would like to see equity in our industry. And I'd like to play a role in that.
Thank you so much, Chai. This was wonderful. It was so great to talk to you. Thank you for making time. I know you have a super busy schedule right now.
Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.